Hey everyone, welcome to the Homeless Left. I'm Matt Weinglass.
I'm Niko Kiriakou.
And we have a great show for you guys planned today. We're going to be diving into free speech. And we're going to look at free speech literally being on trial right now and how the left has kind of gone a little right recently. So we're going to investigate that throughout the show today. But we want to remind people what the Homeless Left is. Niko, if you want to remind everyone.
Yeah, this is a place where political castaways can gather around core principles and common sense.
That's right. And we love to have our arms open, our doors wide open for anybody who feels like they're cast aside from whatever political party or any, tribe or group, or if you felt part of something, you no longer feel part of it, or you're questioning it and you're feeling a little, unsure about it. And when you talk about it, maybe you feel like you're getting told to shut up and stay in line and do the thing. And you're not liking that anymore. And that's where we come in. We're here for anybody that wants to stay curious, wants to keep asking questions and not feeling part of a team that has to win a game. Like we're on a sports field. This is real life. This is our lives. And we're not trying to win a game. We're trying to have better lives for everyone. And we're trying to keep people in power accountable. So that's what we do here at the Homeless Left. So on the topic of free speech, we just really felt this was an important topic to get to because there's been a lot of happenings with the courts and the Democrats and Republicans fighting. And we thought you guys should know because a lot of the mainstream media doesn't cover this. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But right now, Niko, is it time for a little campaign update?
Yeah. I look forward to talking. We're going to talk about also, the Biden stuff and how the censorship attempt to censor online activities through, executive branch has been pushed back by a court of appeals. It's kind of in limbo. It's going to be appealed again, but that's the topic we want to cover today and look into a little bit of some of the coverage of this issue and how the Democrats are taking an interestingly pro-censorship stance on this issue that should have been in their wheelhouse, a decade ago, about pushing back government interference in, our ability to express ourselves in the press and now the social media companies, which are, the prime conduit of information. So, I've got a little update on RFK. So let's cut to that.
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right. So this week in Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign, there was a little scandal that emerged in a Daily Beast article about a journalist that was accidentally given access to an internal Kennedy channel set up through a software program called Slack. It was this article I'm going to cut to here is taking a very critical stance, the dark public Slack channel of RFK Jr.'s campaign. Of course, it's not quite as dark as people think when you go into it. Some of the bombshells, quote unquote, that came out of this analysis involved internal discussions between Kennedy supporters and some of the memes they had posted. But the thing was that these were not necessarily anyone actually on the Kennedy campaign. This was just a channel that was set up for people that claimed to be Kennedy supporters to dialogue. And then this article made it sound like this was an internal expose on what the campaign is doing. So one of the posts that we saw in here is how RFK is going to counter the attacks on his vaccine stance and whether or not his vaccine stance could bury his campaign. The opposition will, at every turn, point to Bobby's position on vaccines as disqualifying, says Wayne Nilsson. And I admit that I'm not an expert in PR or anything like that. I'm a software engineer. Again, this guy's openly saying he's not a professional campaign spokesperson, but he's saying that I believe that this thus far his handling of the opposition has not been ideal. So far the campaign seems to be treating it like radioactive waste and not wanting to go anywhere near it. But the issue is coming for the campaign and it can't be avoided. So this was taken as an example of how his campaign is trying to, machinate behind the scenes to deal with this vaccine issue. But really, this is just some random people commenting. Another one was about this. They said there was anti-transgender memes being exchanged by the Kennedy campaign. But again, these are some of the memes that we saw being exchanged. Never let them forget what they said. These were different people who spoke in favor of vaccine mandates. A meme about Hunter Biden. Another one here about this Dick, the owner of this pawn shop, who is very against transgenderism, and someone shared this meme. And again, how does this directly reflect on the Kennedy campaign? I don't know, but it just shows that the mainstream media is going to be looking for any way in to attack this campaign and treat it like a big expose. So, now we also had another interesting TikTok video that emerged from Donald Trump, in which he actually once again stole a big chunk of Kennedy's platform, on peace and on foreign policy. We'd seen that before with an earlier Trump video where he said he was going to counteract chronic disease, which has been a core message of Kennedy's platform. So let's check this video out and see what Trump has to say and how this dovetails with Kennedy's campaign. Again, you can see Trump reading this, not very Trump-like. He usually speaks off the cuff. So interesting that he seems to be taking messaging pointers from someone in his campaign to steal Kennedy's talking points. Let's have a look.
Calling Russia a gas station with a bunch of nuclear weapons, or calling Putin, quote, authoritarian gas station attendant with some legacy of nuclear weapons from the old Soviet Union, is exactly the kind of simple-minded thinking that has produced decades of failed diplomacy and ultimately war. Where is that war going? Those such as Mitt Romney and Ron DeSantis, very much alike, who insist on arrogantly treating Russia as deeply inferior to the other nations of the world, with no history or culture or pride, are not only ignorant and foolish, but their attitude makes it impossible to negotiate peace. Absolutely impossible. Under my administration, we were tough on Russia, tougher than any administration before, but we also demonstrated respect for Russia and the Russian people. We demonstrated understanding for Russian history and the fact that Russia lost over 20 million lives in World War II. They were fighting with us. This kind of neocon rhetoric mocking Russia's nuclear weapons, along with implying that Putin must be tried and presumably executed as a war criminal, only increases the chance of deadly nuclear escalation. Fundamentally, it shows a lack of depth, a lack of seriousness, and a lack of sophistication on the subtleties and complexities of foreign policy. You can't do certain things and end up with peace. This is not the time for an on-the-job training as we face the possibility of nuclear war. And our leaders, if you call them that, got us there. This is where we are. The word nuclear was never even mentioned during the Trump administration. Now it's being mentioned every hour of every day. We need a statesman and a peacemaker in the White House, not someone who recites mindless and recycled talking points to win the approval of the failed foreign policy establishment that didn't know what they were doing. In 2024, I am the only candidate who can prevent World War III. I will prevent World War III. There's nobody else that's going to do that. Thank you very much.
So, I mean, kind of interesting here, some of the talking points. He's the only candidate that can prevent World War III. I don't know about you, but I don't remember him calling himself the peacemaker. Maybe I overlooked something, but this is something that Kennedy has really framed himself as the peace candidate. His first major policy speech of his campaign was on the anniversary of JFK's American University speech about putting ourselves in the shoes of our adversaries and helping America remember that it was Russia who won World War II, not us. Ultimately, they're the ones that lost 20 million lives and made the ultimate sacrifice. And that we have to put ourselves in their shoes if we understand why they want to develop a nuclear weapon. And he was, that speech helped him, get the American public on board with nuclear development regulations that came later. But, other talking points, that we're on the bridge of nuclear war. This is right out of Kennedy's announcement speech, where he talks about, it's not wise to be agitating an adversary that has more nuclear weapons than us. When he talks about Putin as a gas station attendant and oversimplifying foreign policy, this is something that Kennedy's been harping on again and again in his second interview with Russell Brand that happened in the past week, and also his interview with Lex Friedman, a 2.5-hour interview, which was pretty amazing, where he talked about just how we create these cartoon depictions of our adversaries in order to justify belligerent foreign policy and just drum up war support at home here. He talked about respect for Russia again, on Russia's losses. This is something Kennedy's been talking about with the Ukraine war. It's like, it's not just Ukrainian youth dying, it's Russian people. And why is that good for anybody? So again, this is clearly an effective strategy that Kennedy has. And he literally seems like he's just going through what his most viral videos are and then stealing Trump is the talking points from Kennedy's campaign. I don't know, Matt, you want to jump back in here and share some of your thoughts on what is actually going on with these this stance that he's taking?
Yeah. So, look, sometimes he acts like an idiot. Sometimes he gets things right. I think, if I was on Trump's campaign, staff, I would say this is what to do, because RFK is the only one challenging the war machine. Trump, he says he did during the presidency. I know that, if we look closely at those 4 years, there are moments that he tried to stand up to it, and then he caved, and we can go in and really dissect each of those interactions, or each time that he revealed a military strategy on live TV and said, yeah, we got the oil, we got Syria surrounded, we got the oil, it's ours, so he's done these things.
Which was nicer than Biden's approach, which is like,
yeah,
let me just have a Freudian slip and say, oh, I mean Iraq. Yeah, but at least Trump is open about it. But again, not exactly the embodiment of, diplomatic peacemaker speech.
So I guess this is the thing. We could spend time being like, we can attack Trump right now because he deserves to be called out for literally stealing RFK Jr.'s, messaging and, policy really on preventing World War III, and just understanding what diplomacy actually looks like versus, aggressive U.S. military strategy, which is all we've ever done. So it is something that we could say, hey, you're stealing that, but let's step back and really look at who's to blame right now. And I think the media who cannot recognize that both of these candidates are trying to do their own way, whether they're stealing or not from each other, they're actually trying to do something different than what the establishment is telling us every day. So, it would be nice to turn on the TV and be like, let's see what's going on with Trump. Let's see what's going on with RFK Jr. And then have the media call out the similarities and the differences. But they're only going to do one thing to each of those guys. They're going to continue to present Trump as the boogeyman, and they're going to continue to take RFK Jr. and either write him off as a psychopath or do their best to not inform people that he even exists at all. So the fact that we're here on the homeless left having this conversation, knowing that not too many other people are having this conversation, that's the part that's the most infuriating.
Well, that's why he's not, addressing him very often directly. And the only time he really does, he says, I respect him. And it's like he doesn't want a mano a mano showdown with RFK because what happens when he faces someone of that substance. I'd like to see it. I mean, but he's crossed over into his chronic disease territory. He's crossed over into his peace platform. What's left? Let's make a prediction here. I mean, what else? What other parts of Kennedy's message are having enormous traction? I think, helping the middle class. We've seen now Trump mentioning the middle class more. And now the other thing that Kennedy's got is like his interview with Lex Friedman. And he did this on Rogan. He talked about Sisyphus and the myth of Sisyphus, and how the guy who in the old Greek myth is pushing a stone up a hill because he's been condemned by the gods. In Albert Camus' version, wears a smile on his face. He's not a tortured man because he's happy, because he's putting his shoulder to the stone. He's doing his duty. He's bringing order to a chaotic universe. And that has a ripple effect out, a life of service that makes you, gives you happiness and gives your life purpose and meaning. And when he talks about things like that, and he must have had he must have had 5-10 minutes of talk on Lex Friedman about, he asked him, what is God? I mean, and it was powerful. And it's like, this guy is not only someone with policy stances, but he's also got a spiritual compass and can speak eloquently on literature and, the meaning of life, on the divine. I can't wait to see Trump try to steal that platform and tread into a little profundity and start talking about his personal connection to inner peace and nature. I mean, is he going to steal his environmental platform? Are we going to see Trump down at the border, shaking hands with immigrants? Are we going to see Trump on podcasts like Russell Brand next? I wonder how far he's going to go to steal RFK's thunder.
Oh, he's going to try every one of those. I bet you're right on, Niko. He's going to absolutely do all that. The thing, again, I have to bring up is the media won't even cover this, because if they do, they're going to expose the theater that's them, which is pretending that Kennedy doesn't even exist, and that Trump, the things that they're mad at Trump about are the opposite stuff that they should be calling out. That instead they're focusing on what documents that he illegally had and throws, and we got to get him on 37 counts of unclassified documents, when we're not even looking in the documents to see what the hell is actually in them, which is literally showing the corruption of our military industrial complex and the very little power that a U.S. president actually has when they're confronting the military and they're going into the Oval Office and saying, Mr. President, sir, this is the next country we're going to invade. And that's it. And so that's the part we're not talking about. And so, no, every one of these things that these platforms that Kennedy has are not even going to be shared at all to begin with. So how could they possibly then cover that Trump is stealing them? So that none of it's being broadcast. So the average person has no clue that this is even happening. And if I could just say this, because we got to get on to the other topic, but I'm going to say this. It's sad to me how many people, especially here in Southern California, who consider themselves, progressive lefties, they're paying attention. They claim to be watching the news and getting multiple sources. They don't. Oh, I don't just watch CNN, or I don't like MSNBC. I look at other things. And so you talk to these people, and you're like, well, so what? How do you get your news? Like, all these different ways. I really like to pay attention to all these. Okay, so what do you think of RFK Jr.? And they go one of two things. They give you one of two answers. They either say, oh no, that guy, no, he's dangerous. He's crazy. He's looking for attention. So you hear that. Or if you're not hearing that about him, the other answer you get a lot, and this is probably even worse. They say, who Kennedy? Wait, who's that? Oh, he's running for president. Oh, you mean like as a Republican?
Well, yeah.
No.
The thing is, people who watch Fox News now, a lot of them have heard of him and hear about him because they did a documentary about him. He's frequently discussed on Fox Friends and other channels. That I don't know. I think there are certain limits to how much Trump's going to steal, especially considering his free speech platform and Kennedy's views on the lockdowns. I mean, these were things that Trump oversaw as president when all this was going on. I mean, it was his FBI, it was his CIA, it was his Justice Department to a degree that was treating the social media companies and telling them what to do. and unfairly during the pandemic. So there's certain things, if he tries to touch them, it's going to be like hot potato for him. So we'll see. But the censorship one is really key. And, I think that's what we want to talk about a little more today, because it's just crazy what the Biden administration is trying to do.
Definitely. Well, thanks for the campaign update, Niko. Very cool. And we'll look forward to next week's update as well.
You got it.
I love playing that little transition. It's kind of fun. So here we are, Homeless Left today, guys. We're talking free speech. Free speech is on trial. The left looks like they're going right, and it's very strange, very, very strange. So why don't we get into the next topic here? Because there is an actual court case that there was a court verdict that happened, a court ruling. Niko, we want to show some of this? Yeah, let me bring this up.
Let's introduce it first.
Okay, go ahead.
About what's been going on. Why don't you do that? Because I think the Biden administration, has tried to basically, it wants to appeal a ruling that found that, as far as I understand, the FBI and other government agencies cannot directly coerce social media platforms to censorship content. So it means they can't have some threat of consequences. And there's been some debate back and forth about whether they should be allowed to talk to social media companies at all. But the idea that they may be coercing them to do it, I'm not sure. I'm trying to think, what are the consequences for them? But, but then you had this very brave ruling by the U.S. District Court Judge Terry Doty, which it's basically the state of Missouri against Joe Biden. And the ruling that he had, which favored with the plaintiffs, so the people bringing the case against the defendants, who are in this case Joe Biden and the federal government, in his ruling saying why he favored and supported them, this is just a preliminary ruling that's going to basically support, that said that he thinks they have a case. He did shoot down their request for a class action lawsuit. But, Children's Health Defense was one of the entities, RFK's nonprofit that he started, bringing briefs to this case. But he actually cited Orwell in his ruling here, which I think is, you've read a lot of press about it, but they never tell you the full text of this ruling. So I wanted to bring that in and let people just hear what this guy actually had to say. So he starts out with a quote by Harry Truman, which is, once a government is committed to the principle of silencing the voice of opposition, it has only one place to go, and that is down the path of increasingly repressive measures until it becomes a source of terror to all its citizens and creates a country where everyone lives in fear. This is a pretty old, statement. Imagine, that if he said it back then, what kind of accusations could be leveled at the high-tech, sophisticated censorship being wielded today. So he says, the plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits in establishing that the government has used its power to silence the opposition. Opposition to COVID-19 vaccines, to COVID-19 masking and lockdowns, to the lab leak theory of COVID-19, to the validity of the 2020 election, to President Biden's policies. Again, this is alleged, claims that the plaintiffs are bringing so that we're not being censored from YouTube here. These are the actual words, the ruling of the judge. So he's establishing that the government actually did use its power to censor these stances and statements that the Hunter Biden laptop story was true, and any opposition to policies of the government officials in power. So the impact of this is that this is a partisan form of censorship. All were suppressed, quote. It is quite telling that each example or category of suppressed speech was conservative in nature. This targeted the suppression of conservative ideas is a perfect example of viewpoint discrimination of political speech. American citizens have the right to engage in free debate about the significant issues affecting the country. I just want to pause here. You know, what we've seen in a lot of the press, like the New York Times we'll talk about later, is calling this judge a Trump appointee. Now, because he's pointing out that the conservatives were being suppressed. But remember, like, you know, when Supreme Court justices are appointed, you know, we take their rulings as unbiased and as, I mean, we can criticize them, but we respect their rulings as part of the rule of law in this country. We don't just undermine every ruling they have because of who appointed them at the time. So,
right.
You know, this guy's, you know, he's going to be appealed. It may go to the Supreme Court. But I have confidence the way Supreme Court has been handling some of these issues as of late that he might side with this, they might side with this judge. But let's keep going on and finish up his ruling here. So although this case is still relatively young, and at this stage the court is only examining it in terms of plaintiff's likelihood of success on the merits, the evidence produced thus far depicts an almost dystopian scenario. During the COVID-19 pandemic, a period perhaps best characterized by widespread doubt and uncertainty, the United States government seems to have assumed a role similar to an Orwellian ministry of truth. In fact, they did create a ministry of truth. Next slide. The plaintiffs have presented substantial evidence in support of their claims that they were the victims of a far-reaching and widespread censorship campaigns. This court finds that they are likely to succeed on the merits of their First Amendment free speech claim against the defendants. Therefore, a preliminary injunction should issue immediately against the defendants as set out therein. So that's it.
So we should be at the minimum, bare minimum. I mean, it's not really about having parties. We haven't really like gotten to the goal line yet, but we should definitely be excited about this. This is good. This is
Great
good
news.
This is great news. Unfortunately, all of the liberal media outlets that should be applauding this are doing literally the exact opposite. Let's see what happens when the New York Times, the once amazing publication that we all looked up to as liberals, that we thought, wow, what an insightful, thoughtful, intelligent newspaper. Let's see how they covered it. Our guy Glenn Greenwald actually takes a little read out. Let's see he cover the New York Times on this court ruling.
And you can see in the very first paragraph of this quote unquote news article, there's not an op-ed. The New York Times trying to imply that somehow we're all going to be in danger because now the government is not allowed to censor the internet any longer, and therefore we are vulnerable to disinformation. Look at how many assumptions are embedded in there. A, that the government is competent and capable of decreeing what is disinformation. B, that they're trustworthy in terms of their motives, that when they censor, they will do so to protect the public rather than to protect their own political interests. And that C, we will be harmed by free speech. If there's too much free speech, we will be in danger because of disinformation. This is the mentality of liberal corporate media outlets, that censorship is not just tolerable, but necessary. And everything they write is designed to defend it. Listen to this next paragraph, talking about this judicial ruling banning state censorship. Quote, this ruling, quote, was a victory for Republicans who have often accused social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube of disproportionately taking down right-wing content, sometimes in collaboration with government. Democrats, on the other hand, say the platforms have failed to adequately police information and hateful speech, leading to dangerous outcomes, including violence. Now, on the one hand, I find it kind of repellent that the New York Times wants to cast free speech as nothing more than a partisan dispute where Republicans are in favor of free speech and Democrats are opposed to it, where Republicans are complaining about state censorship and Democrats demand more of it. On the other hand, that actually is true. That really is the official position of the Democratic Party in every conceivable way. Whenever the question becomes, should big tech platforms be censoring more or censoring less, Democrats are immediately on the side of more censorship.
I mean, he summed it up perfectly. That's it. They refuse to look at this as a people issue, as a basic right of free speech and right to access to information. All these things that are being packaged by the Democratic Party and championed by the liberal media that champions the Democratic Party, it's being packaged as this attack on us, as if we and this is the part I think that our fellow lefties don't fully grasp this part. It's so demeaning to us. It's demeaning that they're implying that we don't have the capability to understand what is substantive news and what isn't, that we are going to be damaged by this, but we're going to get the wrong information. It's going to hurt us, that this bad information is going to be violence to us, that it's going to hurt us.
Well, that's the thing. They keep trying to say that this is a matter of we're trying to protect safe speech. We're trying to, protect groups that might censor hate speech. And this is sort of the hammer they've used to knock down our freedom. But, when you read the court ruling from the judge, there was nothing in there about censoring, pro-Nazi groups or censoring anti-gay groups or censoring people that are encouraging violence. It was about censoring like medical information, censoring censoring important political information right before an election, and so it's just a false, reason they give for why they're going to censorship. And you go back to like the whistleblowers, Assange, Snowden, and they sit there and champion their arrest and don't stand up for them. And yet when it comes to printing all the leaks they gave, sure, yeah, we'll print these incredible stories that broke. Or are we going to congratulate this journalist and support him for bringing the most important stories of a decade to the fore? No, we're not going to do that. We're going to be pro locking him up and locking him down. So,
yeah, it's so tragic the way they're able to spin this, that I think, and again, I go back to the media, that they're who I'm most angry about, Niko, is the media, because they are allowing this behavior by our elected officials. They're allowing the courts to get away, not the court in this case, but the politicians that were lobbying against this verdict. They're allowing them to not even put something like you mentioned. They don't even attempt to pretend this is about fighting hate speech. They know they don't have to, because they know there's no media figure that's going to hold them accountable and actually read the actual verdict that we just read on our show. They know that none of the mainstream media is going to actually do that. If the media actually did their job, they would at least have to try a little bit harder to pretend that this was actually about protecting people from violence, from hate. But they don't even have to put it in there. Like you read it. It's the COVID stuff, anything against Hunter Biden's laptop, anything that was going to jeopardize the Democratic Party's position of power. That's all it is. And they didn't even have to pretend it wasn't. So that's the most infuriating part, Niko. So let's I actually want to back up a couple weeks before the verdict and give, because I don't think people fully understand the ridiculousness of the theater that was demonstrated on the floor of the court, trying to sway the court away from this verdict, which they failed. But they tried very, very hard. And I'm going to show one example. This guy is ridiculous. This guy, I mean, okay, let's play it and then we'll comment on it. But this is a clip from a few weeks before the ruling from Democratic Senator Jamie Raskin, who is pleading with the court of why this bill is not to protect free speech. It's actually a pro-Putin bill. Believe it or not, he makes the case that it's a pro-Putin bill. Yeah. Check it out.
And if you don't know this guy, by the way, the reason he's wearing that funny hat is because he's going through cancer chemotherapy and he's bald, apparently. So
it's part of the theater, I think. I mean, yeah, he definitely has cancer, but you got to perform. You got to
more
perform.
ordinary hat. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to perform. It's all theater. Okay, here we go.
They've got a perfect bill for you then. We call it the Putin Protection Act. That's what it is. The Putin Protection Act. Distinguished gentleman from New York explained Putin spent millions of dollars in 2016 to pump propaganda, electoral sabotage into our political system. He did. Every security agency in the country told us that. We got a bipartisan report from the Senate saying it. They're agnostic about it. When it comes to Putin, they see no evil, they hear no evil, none of it. No, but we know that it happened, okay? That's Putin's plan. Why? Putin cannot beat America politically. He can't beat us economically. He can't beat us militarily. Putin can't beat us philosophically. There's one thing he's got: the internet.
Okay, this is okay. So now he's gonna come up with this ridiculous idea of how Putin uses our freedom against us. So the only way to respond to that is to then take away our freedom. I think that's the real point he's trying to make. Let's hear it.
I just want to clarify that.
Why?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, what he's talking about, not the court case, but about a bill that had come before the House about regulating and protecting speech in terms of government, in the same topic, government interfering in free speech. And it did end up passing thanks to the Republicans. So,
okay, thanks for clarifying. Let's hear the justification of how do we fight back against Putin? Let's hear.
Because we're a wide open country. And so he says, let's take advantage of it. Let's go on their social media platform. We'll put people who oppose Putin on the internet in jail, which they do. If you send a tweet against Putin, you're going to jail. You put out a tweet against his filthy imperialist war, which some of them support in Ukraine. If you put out a tweet against that in Russia, you're going to jail. But he says, let's take advantage of America's openness. We'll take advantage of them, and we're going to put out propaganda. We'll lie about when the election is. We'll say it's on Thursday when it's on Tuesday. We'll tell people to go vote next week, whatever. And that's the genesis of this whole thing. We have our security agencies who alert social media, and they say they're putting up fraudulent information on your platform.
I mean, this is what I'm talking about. The insulting nature of that idea. People that you know, good American, hardworking citizens who want to participate in the voting process will see a tweet about voting day is next Wednesday, and they're going to listen to that, and they're gonna screw up, and it's going to be Putin's fault and the fault of the Republicans for allowing a tweet to tell you voting day's Wednesday, not Tuesday. He actually believes that, or he wants us to believe that we're stupid enough to believe that. It's just, it's disgusting, Niko, I think.
well, I mean, and the irony that he's saying that because Russia's this country that clamps down on its people's free speech, and because we have an open country where Russia could come in and clamp down on our free speech, that we now have to give our government the right to clamp down on our free speech. I mean, I don't quite follow his logic there. Did I get that right?
That's pretty much the logic. And also, I'll point out his idea of what a Russian resistant to Putin propaganda is. He didn't really get that. I don't think he really fully flushed that out in advance, because it doesn't make any sense. He's saying that Putin will shut you down if you say what about the war? So let me get this. Okay, so I'm Russian. I live in Russia. And if I say what about the war? If I say Biden needs to send more money to Ukraine, what is the thing that they think is so if you really break it down, you lose the complete logic of when we as actual anti-war people, they want to dismiss us as Putin propaganda. So they're trying to do the same. And so what I'm saying isn't really flushed out, Niko, is that they're trying to do the mirror version of us over there and say they get put in jail. Those anti-Putin people get put in jail because they're saying what? They're also saying no war. So if you're saying no, so what is it? What is the crime? The crime is if you really flush out all the sides, none of it really makes sense, because you have basically people on both sides saying peace and people on both sides saying more war. And so it's a hard part to wrap your head around, because then, like you said, the jailing of people there, we're heading down that same path to punish people here, deplatform, smear, ruin their careers. It's going down the same path.
And I think there's so many people now. I mean, if you just, especially young people, if you go on TikTok, I mean, being pro censorship is not a fringe. I mean, most people genuinely believe that we have to censor some content. And I understand, put the anarchists cookbook online, or there are certain things that we want to probably, keep off the internet and out of books, but, that are sold publicly. But at the same time, it's a very slippery slope, and there's got to be a clear line. Elon Musk's stance has often been, with Twitter, let's just not amplify hate speech. Let's not allow it to go viral. But completely banning every hateful view. I mean, that doesn't work. Very long before anyone who disagrees with anyone is getting banned, and then whoever is holding the keys to decide who gets disagrees is just banning the people that don't like them. So, and I think people that support censorship of certain topics need to be very careful on where that line is drawn. I mean, and again, like, even if you just go back to, like we were saying with the New York Times, where they stood not that long ago, like, take a look at this this article just very back in 2015. Okay, hold on. From the New York Times. Oh, it's blocking it. But
that's okay.
But basically, it's an article, where they're talking about the web freedom. Freedom is a growing issue, and what actually this piece ends up saying here is 2015 government censorship of the internet is a cat and mouse game, and a growing issue as Silicon Valley companies wrestle with how to deal with aggressive countries like Russia and Turkey that are demanding censorship. They're being put in a tricky position to figure out which laws to comply with around the world and which to contest. Russian President Vladimir Putin, is going to require companies to take acts to limit. And obviously, again, here we're siding with freedom, the New York Times, siding with open debate, not encouraging censorship and pointing a finger at these countries. Yes, again, like Raskin is doing, like Russia, for censorship effort, but in the end, not taking the side of censorship. So what has happened in the past 8 years, people who are supporting censorship, where suddenly it's now we are the ones who are siding with the stances of countries like Turkey and the countries like Russia.
It's unbelievable the way this has unfolded to get us to where we are right now, and as divided as we are, and we can't even have this conversation. And I'm nervous having this conversation right now on YouTube. Niko, I think I'm glad we're doing it, but again, we set the show up so we can go even further when we move over to Rumble exclusively. So I think it's time we do that, and then we can get to really some of the nitty gritty here.
Let's do it. And I'm not nervous because, screw them, but it is an important platform still for people that are trying to get content out there. And I encourage everyone who's on these platforms to start migrating to ones that are going to be free and that are going to protect your right to say what you want, because, censorship can be turned around on you at any time if suddenly you decide that you believe something that's not the prevailing, narrative. So.
Hell yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to do a little plug for us before we go, but we are on the Sherwood Players platform, Sherwood Players Production Company here in Los Angeles. We are artists in the entertainment industry. And we get a little political with the show here, but it's important that we keep people engaged, especially in the entertainment industry, of what's actually happening around us. I mean, a lot of people say we can't really, embrace politics too much when we were talking about our careers, but we say, I think it's time we do stand up, and we are fighting for the voice of dissent. We're fighting for the people that can't fight for themselves, and we're challenging the system. And that's what we have to do here in Hollywood. So if you want to get involved in the Sherwood Players community, you can absolutely do that just by going to sherwoodplayers.com. You can also follow us on social at all the Twitter and, you know, all the ones, Facebook, Instagram, at Sherwood Players. And our film festival, International Film Festival, is open for submissions right now for short films. You guys can join us out here in December when we have our live event. Just go to spiff.live if you're a filmmaker, you want to get involved. And we love challenging, hard-hitting, courageous filmmakers and artists and actors and performers who you don't necessarily have to have the same ideology that we're talking about here, but it is about speaking your mind and not feeling afraid and being quiet and keeping your masks on, but actually taking that, rip that mask off and belt out that voice, because we all have one inside. So let's remember to do that. Okay. Very good. Thank you guys for being with us this far. We're going to head over to exclusively on Rumble. If you're not over there right now, just you go to the Homeless Left right on Rumble, the Homeless Left /live. You can get right onto this feed right now, and we will join you in just a moment. We'll see you guys soon.